Good afternoon, everybody. I am Danny Plugger. I'm the Executive Director of Virginians for High Speed Rail. And thank you for joining us for our first webinar. I'm going to apologize in advance for this being our first webinar. If there's any technical difficulties, um, these challenges may arise, but hopefully this will go well. And we hope that this will become a series of webinars discussing multiple issues coming out of this pandemic and all the opportunities that exist. We have a great panel today. My friend Todd Stennis with Amtrak. He's the senior manager of state supported services and business development. We have Mike McLaughlin, who's the chief of rail for the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. And we have Patricia Lusk-Milam, who's Amtrak's manager of state supported contracts. This is going to be a very interesting presentation. Before COVID-19 hit, Virginia was on a very successful route. Our regional trains saw their ridership having grown 21% year over year through February. The General Assembly here in Virginia passed a massive transportation omnibus, which dedicated $50 million more in annual support for rail, including passenger rail. We created the Virginia Rail Authority, Passenger Rail Authority, which will go into effect on July 1. And Governor Northam announced a historic investment in the expansion of passenger rail and ownership of rail corridors. And so we were looking at a lot of bright spots and a lot of success and looking forward to a bright future. And then COVID-19 hit and everything kind of changed. And so from our perspective as advocates and as supporters of better passenger rail service, we need to find out and figure out where we are today and how we start building and growing upon the opportunities that exist over the next several months and years to come. And so with that, I will ask my friend Todd Stennis to kind of take over. I ask that you mute yourselves just so that there's no interference with our presentations. And Todd and Patricia, I'll let you go first.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I recognized a lot of familiar faces and names as I saw the names starting to pop up. Several of you, it's been a few years since I've seen you, so good afternoon. I'm sorry it's under this circumstance, but our friend Danny has done a magnificent job trying to put this together. I've known Danny, gosh, for over a decade now, and working with him in the Commonwealth on intercity passenger rail projects, and certainly look forward to working with you all in the years to come. For those of you that don't know me, I've been with Amtrak 14 years. I am based in New Orleans, and I handle all of the state and local government affairs work from Texas to Virginia. So it's always a pleasure to get out and see many of you and work with the individual members in the state houses and the mayors throughout our network. Obviously, you guys are in a very unique position in the Commonwealth relative to the legislation that's been passed over the course of the last decade that has really boosted Virginia forward in the intercity passenger rail world. But unfortunately, with the circumstances we're dealing with now, we're all taking an impact. And Danny had just asked that we give you a presentation on that. But before we do that, I want to pass this off real quick to Patricia Lusk-Milam, my colleague from Raleigh, and let her give you a little bit of background on her end. Patricia?
Yeah, excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. As Todd mentioned, I am based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm the manager of state-supported contracts. So I handle the contractual relationships with all the states that have state-supported routes within the southern region. I've been with Amtrak, oh geez, I've lost track. I think 37 years now, so I'm an old-timer. And have been working with Todd and with the folks at DRPT as well ever since I took this position. Let's see, I think it's been 8 years ago now. So that's briefly what I do and where I am. And Todd, I'll let you get back to it and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Danny, if we could, I'll just tell you when to go to the next slide since you've got control of the board, if I may. Let's go ahead and do that and go to the first slide. And what we'll do is I'll run through these slides. There's not but just a handful of them. And then when we get to the end, Patricia and I will certainly answer any questions that you all have, depending on which court it actually falls into, whether it's hers or mine. But just to give you a quick overview of things, the national service system-wide, we're taking a significant impact across the board, and just depending on where you're looking, some are going to be greater than others, but they're all pretty extensive, to say the least. So you're looking at a 95% year-over-year reduction in ridership. That's roughly a $700 million operating loss with COVID-19 starting, and more than half the daily frequencies are suspended right now. Obviously, the long distance trains are all still running right now, with the exception of a modified schedule on the Silver service, which we'll touch on that here in just a little bit. And the Acela is not operating at all through the end of this month. We won't operate it until the beginning of the 1st of June, and we'll start with a couple of frequencies there. The Northeast Regional service has been reduced by more than 7%. We've got obviously fewer trains, and the consists have been cut down significantly due to the service requirements. The state-supported service, you all see that directly in the Commonwealth. We have reduced those significantly based on what our state partners are asking for. So in some places, the service has been suspended altogether. In other places, the frequencies have been reduced, or certain schedules have been modified to accommodate what the passenger load is looking like. As you all can see in the Commonwealth, we at least have one frequency running to each of the respective terminal points in the Commonwealth. And as I mentioned earlier, long distance is still going, running all 15 trains, with the exception of the Meteor and the Star, which we're doing some jockeying there, the CSX track work that's going on primarily, but obviously COVID plays from the passenger count standpoint. We did have the city of New Orleans suspended for a period of time. I know that doesn't impact you all, but it was suspended due to the Bonnie Carey Spillway, which is a bridgeway opening for the Mississippi River to bleed off into the Lake Pontchartrain, that is, for several weeks. So we weren't running it south of south of Macomb, Mississippi, but that service has been resumed and we're back operating into New Orleans. Next slide, Danny. All right, so we put together a timeline for you all so that you can see what Amtrak has done in the face of COVID and how we have reacted to everything that's been going on, because obviously we've been taking measures as each week passed, doing what we felt was appropriate. In late January, we did the warning to all the employees. We subsequently, as things started to ramp up, when we got into March, the health benefits announcement came out. The enhanced train cleaning started, and we're talking at the terminal locations, extensive cleaning. We did away with cash payments at the ticket counters, and that's now everything is is credit card only. And so if you're going to buy a ticket to go anywhere, there is no cash, and there's no cash on board the trains either. So in food service, that's all credit cards as well. So then we did have a couple of situations, specifically the California Zephyr, where we had a couple of crews that were testing positive for COVID-19. So those trains were suspended west of Denver for a period of time. We have been doing other extensive things, such as adding flu kits on board. A lot of our management employees are working from their respective homes. Patricia and I being two of those people. We've stepped forward now, and you say, okay, what else are we doing now going forward as things start to ramp back up? Well, there's a couple of things in place. One, many of you know that we've got change fees and we've got cancellation fees in place. All of those are waived through August 31st of this year. It was till the end of this month, and that has now been extended to the 31st of August. Social distancing on board. All of our trains, specifically in coach, we are not selling more than 50% in a given car. So if you've got a 60-seat coach, we're not selling any more than 30 seats in that car. We are now requiring masks for all passengers on board the train. So the way this is working now, in fact, I sent a notice out the other day. Many of you all would have probably gotten that notice if you're on my mailing list, or you could have gotten it through Danny, is that if you are boarding one of our trains, we require that you have a mask on in the respective station while boarding the train, and if you're around people on board the train, such as in the food service car or next to you in a coach seat. But of course, if you're traveling, husband, wife, children, you're not required to have it on at all times. Obviously, if you're getting something to eat, you're eating at your seat. Obviously, you can't have a mask on while you're eating. So there's flexibility in wearing the mask, but we are requiring that all passengers have masks. If you don't have a mask when you board, I know the way it's working at terminal stations is we have some masks. We do not have enough for everyone. So I encourage you all, if you buy a ticket to travel somewhere, bring a mask with you just in case that particular crew, or if it's an unstaffed station or whatever the situation may be, they may not have one, but we do have some on hand, but again, not a significant amount. But that's really where we are as far as ramping back up. We are starting to have conversations with the respective states, our state partners, about how we're going to ramp that back up. Everything is not set in stone as of yet, but we are starting that process now. And I think that we're already looking at a point of where we're starting to see a couple of bumps in ridership in a few places. It's primarily on long distance, but nonetheless, we're seeing it in specific regions of the country. Let's go to the next slide, Danny. So, looking ahead, and again, I've covered most of this, but passengers are required to wear masks, again, effective May the 11th, 2 days ago. The concourses in the Northeastern Corridor stations, when you look at New York Penn Station, they're closed at night so that they can continue to do extensive cleaning. And that's the case with all of our terminal stations, whether we're talking about New York, Chicago, New Orleans, all of them are following the same process, doing extensive cleaning. We are doing the same thing with the equipment in the terminal locations. As I previously mentioned, we're going to start putting Acela back in service on the 1st of June. Patricia, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're going to start with just a couple of frequencies, and then we're going to build up from there based on the information we have on hand at this date and time. We've got an internal recovery task force that, again, they're putting things together as far as any other safety requirements that we're going to have and the decisions that we're going to be making as far as ramping service back up. We have also identified $55 billion in capital improvements. $30 billion of that is outside of the Northeast Corridor that we are going to be looking to Congress to help us fund to jumpstart the economy from the Amtrak perspective, from a jobs perspective and a projects perspective. And those are projects all over the country, again, with 30 billion of that rather coming from around the country and 25 of it coming from inside the Northeast Corridor. And again, we will continue to go to Congress for federal support for 2021. I don't foresee anything being radically different there. But the long and short is we're like everybody else. We're like all of you. We're doing everything we can to make the railroad as safe as we can, to make the equipment as clean as we can, to create the best positive environment to attract the riders back to Amtrak, not just in one part of the country, but all over the country. So with that, I will turn this over to Patricia for a moment if she's got anything else to add as it relates specifically to the Commonwealth, and then we can go to any questions you all have.
Todd, I really do not have anything to add. I think you covered our current status
Okay.
and very well. As I will just say, as Todd mentioned, those of us in the state-supported group are working closely with our state partners on how to adjust service during this pandemic, and look forward to continuing to work with them to restore service where and when we can to optimal benefit. DRPT's, an excellent partner. We're very excited about some of the plans that you have long-term in the Commonwealth, and are looking forward to once we get past this time and things hopefully really begin to get back to normal. We're very much looking forward to continuing to work with you all to expand services in years to come. Other than that, I don't really have anything to add at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. And let me throw one other thing out. I mentioned earlier that the changes on the Silver service. Danny, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, and if I did not get this to you, I'll forward it to you so you can distribute it to everyone. But we just got the passenger service notice out yesterday, I believe it was, for the silver service changes that are in effect through the end of the month that also include the Palmetto. And feel free to share that with the group because that is the passenger service notice. It gives the specific details about what changes are going on with the Silver Meteor, Silver Star, and the Palmetto as it relates to the track work that's taking place south of you guys. But if you don't have that, let me know and I'll resend that to you. I do believe I sent it to you yesterday, though, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely, I believe so, Todd, and I'll make sure to get that out to our folks and everybody on this webinar.
Okay.
Just
I could share that with everybody, but it's one of those things that I don't want to bore you to death reading you the specifics of it. It's one of those that it's actually easier for you to look at than for me to bury you in minutia about the specifics of what's going on that you can see in the passenger service notice.
folks, I will just add on that note, it looks like, and DRPT folks, I want you to know this since this train also runs through your state, it looks like the Carolinian will probably be resuming its full schedule as of June 1st. That is the plan right now. So just to let you know, more to come on that.
Excellent. Thank you, Patricia. And thank you, Todd, as well. Mike, do you want to jump on and discuss the perspective for DRPT?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Danny. Some of you might recognize me from being with you. Danny, I can't remember if it was January or February, but we met early in the year at one of your meetings, myself and some others there in the west end of Richmond. So I'm going to, again, Mike McLaughlin, Chief of Rail for Department of Rail and Public Transportation. I'm going to piggyback on some of the things Todd and Patricia had to say and go into some more details based on Patricia's numbers that she gives us on a regular basis, a few times a week. Thank you, Patricia, for doing that on the ridership. So long story short, our 6 state-supported passenger trains have been cut to 3. They've been cut generally in half. That is, so the one to Roanoke continues. There's 1 train to Newport News and 1 train to Norfolk. For those familiar with Virginia, pretty much everyone on this call, the Norfolk and Newport News trains take care of Richmond, and so do the national trains as well. And it's good to hear the Carolinian will be back on June 1st. That's also another train, obviously serves Staples Mill and Points North. Petersburg, Staples Mill, and Points North. So ridership is down, like they mentioned, in that 95+% range, which is sad for many reasons. But February was a great month. Our Washington Newport News route was up 103%. Our Roanoke route was up 114%. And due to changes last March, we extended a Richmond train to Norfolk. Those numbers are kind of hard to explain, but those numbers were up as well. Even though the 2 Richmond trains turned to 1 Richmond train, the 1 Richmond train was up 76% in March. It should have been just 50%. My point is, went from 2 trains to 1, and it still was up over the expected numbers. So that was looking good through January and February, and then COVID-19 hit. Also want to point out some VRE statistics, which are very similar to Amtrak statistics on many levels. And of course, VREs are commuter rail operator from Broad Run on the NS line into DC and Spotsylvania into DC. Similarly, like Amtrak, those number of trains were cut in half. It went from 16 to 8 trains, and they are down 97.3%. There's actually been a slight uptick in ridership the past few weeks, a small percent, but it's gone from 2,100 to almost 2,200 to almost 2,500. So it's good to see, even if it's just a few hundred more people riding each week. It's in some ways it's good to see that uptick. Of course, we hope people are staying safe and socially separating. So those are our general data points on COVID-19. We worked a lot with Patricia and Joe McHugh, who's a VP of State Supported Services, back in March. They were great in passing their recommended service cuts to us, and there's some back and forth, but we understood why they were doing so, and we were okay with them doing so. And the geographic distribution in that every city that was previously served in town is still being served. So with that, that's pretty much my quick summary. It's always hard going after Todd. He does good presentation, and that Southern draw is much more appealing than my Midwestern accent. So so with that, happy to turn it back to Danny and answer any questions.
Thanks, Mike and Todd. One of the questions that we've gotten, I guess, is twofold. What metrics need to be reached really for us to begin expanding service from those three back up? Is it just the date metrics? And then the second one is, what happens if there's conflict between two different states? Let's say Virginia decides to open up a little bit quicker than Maryland or New York. Would our trains have to basically stop at a border, or are there, what would be the process for making some decision, and if there was those type of conflicts? And that's really kind of to the entire group.
I think that's a question directed at Amtrak.
All right.
I'll start, and I'll let Patricia throw in on this, because I think she's probably got more info than I do on that one.
Okay, sounds good.
I think the long and short of that, where you guys are positioned, the fact that you're the next door neighbor to the Northeast Corridor, I think it's really going to be a conversation between DRPT and Amtrak for the services that are the state trains that go into the Commonwealth. Because again, keep in mind, everything once it's north of the Long Bridge, it's on Amtrak territory, and we're continuing to operate there. So once that decision is made, I don't think that you really have to worry about it from a standpoint of those trains continuing to operate north of Washington to their respective destinations. But that's my opinion. Patricia, if you can jump in with any other information, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that really sums it up, because, Mike, as you know, of course, and as Todd mentioned, the Virginia state-supported trains are Northeast regional trains north of Washington. So we obviously work closely. It's a bit of a unique scenario compared to some of the other states that don't touch the corridor. You kind of have to really look at it as a holistic whole, which is what we're doing. That having been said, all along we and continue to welcome if Virginia has suggestions or concerns. We would certainly work that through. When it comes to other state partners who don't touch the corridor necessarily, and a train runs through more than one state, it's really going to be a case scenario for each situation, how that's handled. If there's a discrepancy between how open one state is and the other, and those concerns, we'll have to do that on a case-by-case basis, basically, and work it out with the state partners involved. We're kind of learning as we go here, so it's a collaborative process.
Okay, I don't have anything to add that, other than if there were conflicts, I'd have to work with my higher ups to communicate with them and work with our, whether it be Amtrak partners or other state partners, moving forward, and I'm confident we'll be able to do so.
Excellent. Thank you all. That's great answers. A question for you, Mike. What aspects of COVID-19 impacts most concern you regarding moving forward with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority and Long Bridge projects?
Well, and maybe I'll do a little background for those who weren't able to be at the presentation we gave back with Danny and others. And there's another question about the trackage we're buying. We did enter into the agreement with CSX back on December 19th to purchase tracks, right of way, and to build infrastructure projects that'll allow for doubling of Amtrak state-supported trains in Virginia. So with regard to any concerns, I'll just state that obviously with COVID-19 impacts, we are constantly analyzing our budget. There's nothing to report now, but we'll always, as any good state or agency would do, we are analyzing our budget revenues and what that will mean to the various projects. So sorry I can't give you more information than that, but that's where we're at right now. I'm still we're still having good discussions with CSX. So sorry I can't give you more information than that.
Thanks, Mike. And I think speaking on behalf of probably every advocate in Virginia, you and Director Mitchell and DRPT and the Secretary and Governor should all be commended for continuing to work on that project and bringing it to fruition. That's a historic project, and anything that the advocacy community can do to support you in that regard, please let us know.
I appreciate it, Danny.
Vicky Badger asked a question. What can I guess Virginia and the community do to assist Amtrak with congressional requests? And I guess that goes out to Todd. How can we help you, especially given there's another infrastructure package potentially moving, and Speaker Pelosi announced another program. So I'm sure there's going to be more negotiations going on the federal level.
Sure, Danny, and good afternoon, Vicki. It's been a while since I've had the pleasure of talking with you. But in any event, I think there's two things. Number one, the funding for FY21 is obviously critical for the next fiscal year, but also the request that we've got for the $55 billion in the projects, which you all will benefit from some of that, as well as many other places around the country. I think it's important for Virginians for High-Speed Rail to make sure that is communicated to the delegation, House and Senate alike, in the Commonwealth there on the federal level, that you all support that, and that you want Virginia to support that, because it not only adds value to Amtrak's national network, but it adds value to exactly what Mike was just talking about a moment ago, relative to the agreement that was signed with CSX back in December. Because we certainly want to continue to grow and expand service in the Commonwealth, but we also want to maintain and have an opportunity to do what we can to enhance the long distance network from an infrastructure standpoint. Keep in mind, a third of the long distance trains serve the Commonwealth. I don't know any other state in the Union that has, outside of the Northeast, mind you, that has a third of the long distance network traveling through it. So that's something to keep in mind, because you all have that great foundation of the long distance network, and then you have on top of that the fantastic network and methodical planning going on from DRPT about the future of the state supported work. So from that position, I think it's very important that you all communicate with your members in the federal delegation how important those bills are that pertain to Amtrak funding going forward.
And if I can add to that, Danny, Todd, thanks for teaming me up. Want to state that as part of the CSX deal, we are receiving funding from Amtrak as well. We went to their board and presented last fall, and we have an MOU with Amtrak. So every dollar, like federal dollar that goes to Amtrak, will help in Virginia, not only all the reasons for Todd said, but to help back up their commitment to the $3.7 billion CSX deal.
Excellent.
That's great. Hey, Danny, and if I could add one other thing, I don't know how many of your members look at Amtrak.com as far as the specifics of the website and all the different things that we share on there. But for everybody that's on the phone, and some of you that I know and have relationships with, I've shared these with you before directly. But I encourage you to look at Amtrak state fact sheets on Amtrak.com. There's a tab at the bottom of the page on the homepage of Amtrak.com called About Amtrak. You can find it there, and it's called National Fact Sheets. Once you open the link, National Fact Sheets and State Fact Sheets. And we show on those fact sheet specifics as far as the number of employees we have, the amount of salaries that we have, and the cumulative state contracts that we have. It doesn't show the specifics, but the reason why I'm sharing this with you is when Amtrak is funded, there's a misperception that it's throwing money just to run trains. Well, that's not entirely accurate, because the other side of that equation is what the impact is to a given state's economy and what Amtrak's role is in that given state. So when we're talking about the Commonwealth of Virginia, we talk about the number of employees that we have that live in the Commonwealth. You think about all of those salaries from a cumulative effect, and the fact that that money is circulating back through the economy. And then in the private sector, we've got contracts with numerous businesses that are suppliers or a variety of different things from IT all the way on down. And but for Amtrak, they wouldn't have those specific contracts. So when you look at the circle of the economy, Amtrak plays a major role in the Commonwealth's economy, not only from a transportation standpoint, but also from a job standpoint and generating revenue in the private sector business quarter.
Absolutely. And building off that a little bit, we have a question from John Easter with the Richmond Chamber of Commerce. And he asked, what are we doing to get the word out to passengers about your safety measures to build confidence so they feel comfortable riding trains again? And are there any resources that the Chamber of Commerce's, both Richmond and I assume others around the state, could do to help publicize?
Absolutely. If you will also go to Amtrak.com and look at the media page that we have there, and Danny, I'll get you a link to that so that you can share it with the members, including the chamber. Anytime that we have a media advisory go out, as soon as it goes out, it's also published on Amtrak.com. So I would encourage you to look there. Everything from what we're doing as far as the safety aspects that we've already covered, all the way down to what the latest requirements are on wearing the masks, all of that we put out in media advisory. So I'll be sure that Danny has that link and can get that out to all of you.
Thank you. And Todd, we have another question for you. Do all the Virginia trains still maintain a minimal cafe service, noting that some of the Northeast regionals do not?
I'm going to defer that to Patricia, because she would probably know a little bit better about that than I would. Do you know something?
Excuse me. I'll be honest, at the moment, I don't believe they all do, but I'll be honest with you, I would need to look at the most recent service plan, which for the Virginia trains is broken out by train number. So it's quite a few train numbers to pick through, but I would have to double check that and see which trains do and do not have the cafe service at this time. I can certainly follow up with that info if anybody would like a follow up on that.
Okay. And building off that a little bit, Rafi with Virginians, he's on our advisory committee, had asked if I guess there was a pilot project for mobile ordering from the Amtrak cafes. And was wondering if those have been implemented or accelerated to minimize cafe car crowds and lines as we begin to re-implement service and expand and hopefully grow ridership once again, once we're through the pandemic.
Sorry,
Patricia, if you can answer that, if you know it.
I was just going to say I will have to double check on that. I don't think we have implemented that scenario at this time, but I'll have to follow up and see if we've done it on any of our routes. So I'd have to follow up on that as well.
Okay.
I concur with that comment. I'm not aware of that as of yet.
Okay. Thank you both. And I think that is, for the most part, most of the questions. There's a comment from Chris Smith with VDRPT, and this is mainly for the participants of the webinar, not necessarily the panelists, but a lot of us are preparing for the General Assembly to go back in session here in Virginia to rectify their budgets. I imagine June or July, maybe August, is what we're watching for. But the governor went for a budget amendment to allow a little bit of flexibility in their transportation funds. And so he's just asking that we keep an eye on that to ensure that projects in the 6-year plan continue to move forward. And so we'll surely keep everyone informed about what happens in the General Assembly if there is a special session. And then last, a little bit of housekeeping on our side, if there's no more questions for Todd and Mike regarding COVID-19. Our annual luncheon, we've moved it to September 18th. Our keynote will be Wick Moorman. We've invited A lot of different participants, including Director Mitchell with DRPT and Secretary Valentine. And originally, we've moved it 6 months from its original date, and it's a celebration of everything going on with passenger rail in Virginia, obviously before COVID, but it can still be a celebration. And so I will finish with one last question for you, Mike. Is the state still supporting the special bus service from Christiansburg to Washington, which I believe is the Virginia Breeze?
Yes.
Which has been postponed until after COVID-19, but does get.
You know, it's a good question, Chris. If you could jump in, I know it's been discussed with Jen DeBrule, my transit counterpart, and Danny, I'll have to get you that information. Chris, do you know off the top of your head what the changes have been?
So the Virginia, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. The Virginia Breeze stopped all service as of April the 10th. Ridership had also dropped off because of the pandemic, and also offered refunds for customers who booked to the 30th. We're still looking at when that service might pick up and run again. One of the interesting things that we're working through too is that program is federally supported. It's a federal mandate, actually. But with the CARES Act funding that came down for public transportation, and especially the rural, there has been quite an outcry from other private coaches and private motor industries looking for support too, up to and including Greyhound. And so we're having some conversations nationally with how does that look with states who are supporting their own services like Virginia Breeze, but also an industry itself that's taking a pretty big beating from the economic downturn that does that. We don't have a date for coming back online yet, and in fact, this was going to be a year where Virginia Breeze service was going to expand. 2 new routes were set to open out of Danville and out of South Hill this summer or fall. But right now, everything on that side of the house is on hold too.
Thanks, Chris, for bailing me out.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Mike and Todd and Patricia and everyone for joining us today. I hope that you found this webinar to be informative and helpful. We will certainly get more information out to you about all the different points that we talked about. But thank you again for our great panelists for giving an update as we all work through the impact of this pandemic. And I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. And thank you for your support.
And we appreciate it. We appreciate all your support and all you guys, you and everyone in your board and your members do, Danny.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Danny. Thank you for all that you do. We've had a great working relationship with you and DRPT for many, many years now, and it is a strong relationship, one that I really use as a template as I go to other states around the country, particularly in the Southeast, to share the model of expanding intercity passenger rail. So thank you all for what you do. We appreciate your support, and let us know what we can do to help you going forward. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.